Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you your host, the Dom.
Hello, beautiful watchers, and a great big bah humbug to you all. Thank you all so much for joining me on the inaugural episode of the Lost in Adaptation DomOscars. As you probably already know, there are some stories out there that have been adapted and readapted so many times that just choosing one is next to impossible, but talking about all of them is unfeasible. I got lucky with Dracula because Coppola took one for the team by drawing attention to himself, but I can't always count on that happening, so I've decided on this compromise. I'm assuming you all know how the Oscars work. Films are nominated for certain categories, and a bunch of boring old bastards sit in a dark room and choose the winner. Well, this is like that, except all the categories relate to the adaptation process, and the boring old bastards are just me. So, A Christmas Carol, written by Charles Dickens. Popular in its time, popular now. Between the theatre, TV, film, and Christmas specials, there have been literally, and I know the correct use of that word, been hundreds of reincarnations of this book. Thanks to the nominations of my wise and learned Patreon supporters, the list has been narrowed down to something a little more manageable. Before I begin with the awards, I'm sorry to announce that despite receiving several nominations, Scrooge starring Bill Murray has regretfully been disqualified on the grounds that it's not actually an adaptation of the novel, it's a parody of the story. I will discuss my personal philosophy towards the difference in another video. Okay, now that that's out of the way, the first category is Most Accurate Scrooge.
Physically, Scrooge is described as being very thin and having a pointy nose, bloodshot red eyes, blue lips, and a grating voice. All of this was caused by a coldness deep inside him. Contrary to popular belief, his catchphrase was not in fact "bah humbug." Bah was just what he would say to dismiss someone else's argument if he couldn't think of a good retort, and he liked to describe Christmas as a humbug. Sometimes the words would fall sequentially, but that was not intentional. His profession isn't quite clear in the book. He refers to himself simply as a businessman. He appears to be involved in quite a few ventures, including money lending and something that requires him to own a warehouse. His dislike for Christmas appears to be due, in part, to all the worst events of his life taking place around that time of year, like getting abandoned at boarding school, his fiancée leaving him, and his best friend dying. You know, looking at it that way, not being so keen on this particular holiday is perfectly understandable. Although being a complete douchebag the rest of the year round is still pretty uncool.
And the nominations are Alistair Sim, George C. Scott, Scrooge McDuck, Patrick Stewart, and Jim Carrey.
Sim plays Scrooge as a man who genuinely does not give any kind of a shit anymore. You get the impression that he wouldn't go out of his way to be horrible to you unless you were stupid enough to get in his way or say something dumb to him. His responses to people's requests for an extension to a loan or a donation to charity were cold-hearted as fuck, but not technically unfair, as he always gave reasons. Mean reasons, but reasons nonetheless. He did a good job of showing Scrooge's sheer terror at seeing the ghost of Jacob Marley, and his interactions with the past, present, and future ghosts are pretty accurate to the book. The film adds in some things from his past not included in the book, like his sister's last words, his and Marley's hostile takeover of the business, and his refusal to go and visit his dying friend until after working hours. It added depth to the character, which I guess is good for the film, but bad for adaptation points. Scott plays a slightly more in-your-face Scrooge. He comes off as a man proud and unapologetic of his achievements in business, and for the most part unashamed of his lack of humanity. He's a bit more mean-spirited than Book Scrooge, as this version of him is perfectly happy to smile and laugh, but only at the misfortune of others. It worked well in the film, but it's a little off from the book. Misery and grumpiness were Scrooge's thing, as opposed to outright meanness. They made this Scrooge's backstory even sadder than the originals, believe it or not. In the book, Scrooge's father eventually relents in his dislike for him and sends his sister to pick him up from school. In the film, it turns out he just did this so he can send him off to an apprenticeship right away. You fucking dicks. That was the one happy memory of his childhood and you took it away from him! Okay, obviously I should be saying Alan Young here, not Scrooge McDuck, as he is the voice actor, but I'm inclined to think of this as one fictional character playing another. If you think that's weird and mental, fine, but also shut up. As a character in a Christmas special goes, this wasn't bad at all. You could say this was the role Scrooge McDuck was born to play, considering his initial concept was to be an avian parody of this very character. That said, at the end of the day, this is still a Disney cartoon. It's light-hearted and full of jokes and visual comedy. It's a fun, nostalgic watch, but it's not going to wow anyone with how loyal it was to the book, because it wasn't trying to be loyal to the book. It was trying to make you feel happy and entertained all the way through. Being a huge fan of Sir Patrick Stewart, I'm inclined to root for him here, but I promise I'll try to stay fair. Sir Patrick brings all of his mighty thespian acting abilities to the role, and then some. No phoning it in for this Starfleet Captain Mutant Professor. You certainly have no trouble believing he could be a rich and powerful businessman, as Sir Patrick always radiates the impression that he's in command of whatever room he's in. However, therein lies the issue I have with him as Scrooge. In several scenes of the book, Scrooge is reduced to being a simpering wreck cowering in the corner, and I genuinely don't think Sir Patrick knows how to be cowardly. He can act shocked and surprised, but he quickly resets back to being the in-control badass he's always been before. Everything else is pretty good though. Scrooge's powerful nostalgic feelings about his past, his back and forth of the ghost of Christmas present, and his newfound good humour on Christmas morning are all well represented with this version of him. Because Carey was animated, they were able to make him more physically Scrooge-like than the others. However, due to the cartoonish style they were going with, he ended up being more of a caricature of the man described in the book instead of an actual representation. They also put a bit of Carey's face in it as well, presumably so his expression could match his voice better. If you just look at him for who he is and not his actions in the film, he's probably leagues ahead of the others. Everything about him radiates misery and greed just like in the book, and he has the right balance of outward hostility and inner self-loathing. Unfortunately, his actions in the film can't be ignored. No matter how many descriptions of the book you read, you'll never hear the word slapstick used once. The film had its own style and pacing it wanted to go with, and I personally kind of liked it, but it's completely at odds to the source material. For example, while my memory is not what it used to be, I'm pretty fucking sure Scrooge didn't have an unbreakable adamantium skeleton in the book.
And the winner of Most Accurate Scrooge is... Alistair Sim.
This was a genuinely really difficult call, as pretty much all of the nominations were great actors who brought something unique and wonderful to the role, but of all of them, the one that really struck me as being the most in touch with his book predecessor was Sim. His performance as Scrooge was infused with a constant reminder that this was a man who hated himself as much as anything else. He wasn't a dick because he was deriving any pleasure from it, he was just a man who'd been through so much shit in his life he'd given up trying to be happy and pushed away anyone who might try to change that. After the ghost ordeal, all the Scrooges claimed that they felt as happy as an angel or as giddy as a schoolboy, but with Sim you could really see it. In the last few minutes of the film, Sim looks like he's having the genuine time of his life. Like I mentioned, this was damn close and hard to pick for me, but what can I say? The dude nailed it.
Very good, but what would Christmas be without a bunch of supernatural entities bullying you into accepting someone else's beliefs using nostalgia, guilt and fear? It was my genuine intention to just have one category for the Ghost to share originally, but it turned out to be wildly impractical as no one film managed to have a perfect set. So, we shall start with the most accurate Ghost of Christmas Past.
The Ghost of Christmas Past in the book was described as having an old yet young face, as looking like a man and a woman with long muscular arms but a child-sized body, and having some sort of light or flame atop their head. And in addition to all of that, was said to be, and I'm quoting directly from the book here, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now with a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. This is a very creative and poetic description, but comes with the slight disadvantage that it makes no fucking sense. Of course, not making sense actually makes perfect sense in this context. Scrooge is trying to describe something magical and otherworldly, and it's entirely possible that the spirit was visually contradictory or impossible by normal human standards. The other notable thing you should possibly know about the Ghost of Christmas Past from the book? Scrooge very well may have killed him. He carried around a candle snuffer the size of a hat, which Scrooge grabs off him in a fit of rage and fear and jams over his head, ending the first part of the story. He's not actually seen again after that.
And the nominations are The Ghost of Christmas Past 1951, The Ghost of Christmas Past 1984, The Ghost of Christmas Past 2009, and The Ghost of Christmas Past, The Muppets Christmas Carol.
All of the 1951 ghosts lack the special effects available to later productions, but that doesn't stop them from taking full advantage of what was available. The Ghost of Christmas Past is pretty much just an older gentleman, but you're reminded of his ghost status as he remains slightly translucent throughout. He gives off the right amount of casual wiseness of his book character, but he lacks the final fight between him and Scrooge, where Scrooge attempts to snuff him out using his own metal cap. In the 1984 production, The Ghost of Christmas Past is a woman of, again, no particular unusualness. They reference the light on her head, but it isn't really shown for some reason. They do remember the metal cap and Scrooge's use of it though. There's nothing at all wrong with her performance, but it doesn't exactly stand out much. The 2009 film is very creative in every way, including the ghosts. This incarnation of The Ghost of Christmas Past essentially looks like a floating candle. That actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. He carries around a snuffer and he's described as being bright and always changing shape, you know, like a flame. Jim Carrey does the voice for him as well and makes him sound, I don't know, kind of Irish? It's hard to tell because he sort of whispers all his lines. I'm glad that Muppets got nominated. I love this movie long time. I saw it at a time before my holiday spirit soured, so it can bring a smile to my face even now. The Muppets ghost is shown as a child-sized, angel-like figure of reasonably androgynous appearance, although leaning slightly towards the effeminate in my opinion. Visually, it's a damn good take on the ghost, and the fact that it's a puppet actually works in its favour. Fun fact, apparently they filmed it in a water tank to get that anti-gravity movement effect. If I have one complaint, it's that they made the ghost just a little bit too quiet and unassuming. All of the ghosts in the book gave off the impression they were enjoying Scrooge's discomfort just a little bit more than they should be.
And the winner is The Ghost of Christmas Past 2009.
As I said before, with the original book ghost being impossible to recreate, each film was free to do whatever the hell it wanted with it, and this was the only film that had the technology and the inclination to really take advantage of that. You might have to be told a few of the other spirits weren't human, but if you saw this thing hovering over you, you'd know without a shadow of a doubt that shit just got supernatural up in this joint. The ghost also sticks to the book's dialogue remarkably faithfully, and they kept Scrooge's assassination attempt, albeit with some stupid, wacky consequences. This movie has many flaws, but you have to give it this: it knew how to mix being creative and being surprisingly accurate to the book. Again, for the most part. For the record, the Muppets were a very close runner-up on this one.
Up next, is he meant to be God? Is he meant to be Santa Claus? I don't think even he knows. The most accurate ghost of Christmas Present.
This ghost is comparatively much easier to describe, being a giant man with a big brown beard and a loose-fitting green robe that showed off his chest. He carried around a torch that leaked a magic food-improving incense and arrived sitting on top a big pile of Christmas food for some reason. Scrooge notes that he appears to have a rusty old scabbard but no sword, representative of goodwill towards man and peace on earth and whatnot. He had a clever and cutting way of repeating Scrooge's own grumpy words back to him whenever he caught him being hypocritical. He also took 2 small children with him everywhere he went under the bottom of his robe, yeesh, someone called social services, who were apparently the embodiment of ignorance and want. They're described as being so thin and filthy they barely look human. This spirit's lifespan is only 1 day, each Christmas before and after him being one of his brothers, not him. He ages rapidly in the story and fades away completely at the stroke of midnight.
And it's exactly the same nominations as before: 1951, 1984, 2009, and The Muppets.
The 1951 Ghost of Christmas Present's first and most obvious drawback is that he's dressed in the wrong fucking colour. Damn it, Coca-Cola, did you get to him too? He does mention that his time with Scrooge is short and he has the creepy children with him, but he doesn't age rapidly like he was described as doing in the book, simply disappearing at midnight. The 1984 Ghost of Christmas Present stands out well. In this film, they don't do the usual thing of having him appear as a massive giant at first and then shrinking him down to human size later, but instead put a guy on little stilts. Or found an impressively tall actor. Shit, I can't actually tell. That's pretty good. He delivers the book's satisfying zingers to Scrooge and he has the metaphorical children with him. However, his main omission is that he too doesn't age throughout the day. He also opens up a slight plot hole by saying all the other preceding Christmases were his brothers, not him, but then contradicting himself later by talking about coming back once a year. The 2009 Ghost of Christmas Present is shown to be a true giant and he remains so throughout. Like everything else in this movie, his throne of food is massively over the top and exaggerated. They cut out a lot of what he shows Scrooge from the book so they could do the admittedly pretty cool scene where he moves the whole room around the city. It's one of the few adaptations that chose to include his empty sword sheath, and, interestingly enough to note, it's the only version I'm aware of where they kept the part in which the ghost, when asked about the tradition of forcing bakers and the like not to light their ovens on religious holidays and Sundays and depriving the poor of their only source of food, openly disavows the actions of the church and pretty much said they were full of shit. In keeping with the let's go as extreme as possible theme, the ghost does not simply vanish at midnight like he does in the book, he actually dies as each stroke of the clock appears to give him a heart attack and then crumbles into a laughing skeleton. The Muppet Ghost of Christmas Present is... well, I guess you can't actually say he's a Muppet as he's clearly a dude in a full body costume. He's dressed in gold this time and seems to have forgotten his torch, which is probably for the best considering he looks pretty flammable. This is by far the happiest of all the variations. Some of the other ghosts may have laughed a lot as well, but with the Muppets one you really feel like he means it. It's nice, but it's not very accurate as it seems he's now too light-hearted to get into the arguments with Scrooge that they had in the book. They did, however, remember that he got older as Christmas drew to a close, and I don't begrudge them omitting the disturbing children because, damn, can you imagine? That'd mess your childhood up and no mistake.
And the winner is... The Ghost of Christmas Present 1951.
This was a hard choice, not because they were all bad and not because they were all good, just because none of them managed to include all the points I consider to be key to the character. Every last one of them either got the image wrong, forgot the aging thing, went off on too much of a tangent being creative, or were just too fun for their own good. Honestly, there's probably quite a lot of films out there that did it a lot better, but they didn't get a nomination for this category, so from this lot, I guess this guy wins by default.
And finally, it's tall, it's creepy, it's mute, it's the most accurate ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Christmas Yet to Come, aka Christmas Future, is clearly the intentionally scariest of the ghosts, being described as a tall, black, robed spectre that's hooded in such a way that you can see no hint of what it looks like underneath. The only part of his body that you ever see is his hands as he points to things or directions, which are apparently creepy but still mostly human-like. The way he moved was akin to both walking and floating in a most disconcerting way. This ghost apparently liked to let situations speak for themselves and is completely silent throughout, something that really upsets Scrooge as witnessing one's own demise understandably comes with a few follow-up questions.
And the nominations are as follows. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come 1951, The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come 1984, The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come 1999, and The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come 2009.
The 1951 Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is a little underwhelming but perfectly serviceable. They focus on his hands a lot, just like Scrooge did in the books, and he's covered head to foot in black robes, pretty much as described. It showed him the Cratchits after Tim's death and everyone's disinterest in his own funeral, just like in the book, which is good, but honestly, none of it really blew me away with accuracy or anything. That's actually true of all the nominations now that I think about it. With one exception, they all followed the ghost's behaviour reasonably well. I may have to make my decision based on looks rather than actions here. Appearing off in the mid-distance at first, the 1984 Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come gives off an impressive aura of dread and foreboding. The way that light and fog is utilised in this film scene is very reminiscent of a stage production, and I think it pays off really well. This clever use of old school special effects remains constant throughout this ghost screen time, and it's very, very impressive. Gun to my head, if I had to think of a flaw, I'd take issue with the weird metallic screech that plays whenever it's around. I couldn't tell if this was supposed to be a noise the ghost was making or if it was just a weird sound effect, but it's a little distracting either way. The 1999 Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come? Well, he's got little LED lights for eyes. I don't know if that was scary in the late 90s, but seeing it today kind of robs the dude of any intimidation he might have had. They also don't put a lot of effort into creatively filming this ghost, as he's often just sort of standing there looking like an oversized Jawa. They don't even bother to put makeup on his hands. Thanks to Sir Patrick, it at least gets a good intro. Scrooge is booking it away from the Ghost of Christmas Present, then stops dead in his tracks, and you get a few seconds of this great "what the fuck am I seeing" look in his face, and then boom, ghost approaching. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but I feel more effort could have gone into this. It's a costume better suited to a low-budget school play than a movie in my opinion. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is interesting in the 2009 version. Rather than go with the physical robe figure described in the book, they portrayed it as a robe skeletal shadow that could occasionally reach out of the wall at you. A creative, if not very accurate take on it. Unfortunately, the movie kind of gives up on the book for a few minutes here and indulges in a goofy chase scene with Scrooge and the ghost. By the time they get back on track, it's hard to take it seriously anymore. Before announcing the winner, I just want to point out that it's interesting to note that in every single adaptation out there, they always remember to include Jacob Marley's face in the door knocker. Despite sounding slightly goofy, it appears that is a quintessential part of the story.
And the winner is The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come 1984.
This was a no-brainer for me. The Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is a show stealer in this production. It's not often on screen, but when it is, it fully captures the shit-in-pants-inducing terror that was described in the novel. Everything from the robes to the creepy hands to the half-walk, half-glide it does is spot on. From its first appearance to its last scene, this thing is the best embodiment of this ghost I've ever seen, and it's damn impressive.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today, beautiful watchers, but please do join me next time when we'll be looking at the most accurate supporting cast, the best use of original book dialogue, the most loyal adaptation overall, and the best adaptation overall. Until then, a very Merry Christmas! I can't do it, I'm sorry. Happy New Year.
Hey beautiful watchers, if you're interested in taking part in nominating movies for future Lost in Adaptation DomOscars, it's open to all levels of Patreon supporters. Doesn't matter if you're contributing $2 or $20, you get to nominate as many movies as you feel deserve recognition. There's also other pre-existing rewards such as being in the Have You Seen It, Have You Read It census, and you can get included in my Skype chat room and correct my terrible mispronunciation of things in person if you feel so inclined. Thanks for watching, see you next time.